Our escape attempt has been thwarted by password recovery questions about the headmaster's personal life. Oh well. Today we'll be exploring the Treglazov Museum dedicated to the life and times of the headmaster. Like any good museum, it's a pretty uncomplicated circular experience. It doesn't have a gift shop, but it does have a dedicated security office with attached prison cells, so that's something. In keeping with the grand traditions, we don't make it 10 seconds into our heist before encountering the long-patrolling CVX, right as he walks around the corner into our face. Fantastic. We have two mortal foes here. One is the patrolling armoured guard, and the other is the point-and-click navigation interface, which really is not good at the kind of pathfinding we want to use when running from guards in a stealth game. Fortunately, I'm able to get Hope behind the main desk, and it kind of all just plays out from there. As I said in the last video, these guys are annoyingly well equipped and have sensible standing orders, but they are still morons. We're just going to chill here for a bit until he wanders back out into the library so we can explore in peace. Witnessing all this does give us a much better idea of CVX's overall patrol route. He walks through the two rooms in the museum and then comes out that level 2 door and walks around the library for a bit. In other words, he's really only a threat to us for about half of his total patrol time. As long as we can keep track of roughly where he is at any given time, we're gonna be pretty okay with all this.
What have you got?
Alright, take 2 at this room. Behind that wall to the right is the guard I was expecting to run into in here. He's much less of a problem than CVX. He just walks in a circle around the chairs. He's slightly more of a problem than it might seem, because there's a little bit more to do in here than it might seem. There's a cassette under the podium, of course. We've got to pickpocket the guy. We should probably take a look at the back of the room. And there's those big glowing buttons to consider as well. What? And that's why you want to come back here. There's the vent at the top, of course. And there's the usual stray can of pepper spray. Because what else would we come to expect? Due to our frugality in the previous chapter, we're running a little surplus on screwdrivers, so we can get into this vent straight away. That's nice.
Oh, the screwdriver broke.
There are, obviously, exactly as many screwdrivers in the game as there are vents to use them on. Some vents lead to Zega rooms, others are just shortcuts, but some of these shortcuts are much more useful than others.
It's a taser.
So if you find one you can do without, you can save it for later. We're carrying 6 tasers, by the way. Anyway, let's take a poke around.
Holy 1990s. It's an old cardboard standee. Just a nostalgic keepsake from one of the overseer's bookstore signings. I don't know where Zager found this life-sized embarrassment, but it appears he was using it for target practice.
We can only speculate as to how Treglazov intended one to defrag one's mind, but it's probably not very different from any of the other dime a dozen faux intellectual demagogues whispering sweet nothings about self-actualization, so let's not. Next up we have this thing.
I guess Zager didn't appreciate the owl gift.
It's left up to our imagination how Zager came into possession of this gift, or even who the original recipient was. It probably came from Treglazov, though.
Not to be outdone by the overseer, our man Zager had printed his own first edition before his untimely death.
For the most part, this is again a pretty close reproduction of what ended up being the final published manifesto. Most of the changes are pretty plausible actually. They were done by Zager and consist of different pieces of paper being taped over the original writing. But some aspects of the actual printed text are different too. And this is a very big deal, I assure you. It's extremely important. Shut up.
Zager was busy designing his own manifesto.
This one, however, is spot on.
Sadly, overt fascism continues unchecked in many parts of the world. As a journalist, Zager covered atrocities like this one before he ever snuck inside Metamorphosis. These stories only further fueled his outrage.
I don't know if this specific article is real, but the events referenced definitely are. And given that this game was developed mostly in the first few months of 2014, it gives a pretty good idea of how current they're able to be in their commentary.
Sounds good.
Heading to the
Anyway,
vent.
that's all from here. As usual, I'll be reposting the Zager tapes from this chapter in the thread, one at a time with each video, so watch out for that. Now, back to whatever the hell this is.
Upon completing the first draft, I delivered it personally to a small publishing house in the capital of France. A minor company I acquired and resurrected to suit my needs. I even went so far as to live in the rickety old apartment above the offices to personally oversee the publishing process.
I don't know if you've noticed, but this man takes his book very, very seriously. Anyway, let's make our way out of here and collect the rest of the stuff in this room.
Have a quiet night.
Headmaster! Headmaster, over here!
If it isn't my favorite journalist from the Morning Bell.
It was a brilliant speech, Headmaster.
Why, thank you, Miss Sade.
Please, call me Maddie. Perhaps you could tell your citizens a bit more about the arrival. As much as you can state publicly, of course.
Of course, well, in a matter of weeks, we will take our bow on the global stage. The arrival is our world debut, and once it comes to pass, there will be little doubt that though we are a small nation and few in number, we are a force to be reckoned with.
I'm sorry, I had a follow-up, but I just got lost in the power of your voice.
Why, Maddie, please, you embarrass me.
Now, where was I? Oh, right. Your cryptic answers, which I adore, I must add.
Thank you.
But they've left some to speculate that the arrival refers to our ascension as a nuclear power.
Ah, nuclear power. In the 21st century, nuclear power is a contradiction in terms. Let those dying republics split atoms to their heart's content. No, my dear Maddie, what our République achieved is something far more impressive. And the mark we leave on the world will last an eternity.
You kind of have to love Matty, really. She's no less corrupt than everybody else down here, and she's definitely no less amoral than the likes of Derringer. But she just seems much more honest with herself about that fact. Plus she's actually good at her job, unlike Derringer.
And though I was born into a world already in progress, with its arcane laws and perverse morality, with a washwoman for a mother and a question mark for a father, I knew that one day I would retire to a country of my own design, free from societal restraint.
Right, because if there's one thing that Metamorphosis is absolutely free from, it's restraint.
Set.
No sign of the girl.
Hello, librarian. Good evening, Overseer. Around the pre-cals, I must insist you address me as headmaster.
Oh, my apologies, sir.
What did you think of my lecture? You may speak freely.
Well, well, you most certainly have a passion for what you teach. It was most inspiring.
Your eyes and your words don't seem to align. Now, I asked that you speak freely. It's okay. No harm in speaking your mind to me. I will respect your honesty. In fact, I demand nothing less.
Well then, sir, to be blunt, it felt more like a sermon than a lecture tonight.
Do you take issue with that? Again, speak freely.
Well, sir, I have never been a part of an academy quite like this one. The pre-cals, well, they seem to study only one subject here.
What subject is that?
Well, sir, you.
Nonsense, my good man. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to promoting my book, République by Treglazov, which is largely about me, Treglazov, here at this event in the Treglazov Museum. Also, this still bodes fantastically. Oh, come on. Fortunately, a doorway and a plot plant very near each other make for a perfect opportunity to hide.
That's strange.
Anyway, since we're hiding here, let's examine the game that we stole from this guy.
As you can imagine, my job here in Metamorphosis can be pretty stressful. Whenever I need to zone out, I engage my brain with Kami, which is a clever and charming puzzle game. Kami is Japanese for paper. Kami is also Japanese for God. Why do I feel closer to God when I play time-wasting puzzle games? I sure do lead a dynamite life.
The Japanese language remains unparalleled in its ability to produce homophones, and there are even more clever wordplays in the title of notable Zelda-like Okami than I thought there were. As with any good museum, this one has an oversized weird set piece. A train carriage. I'm sure this will make sense shortly.
Having tripped over every pesky regulation in my adopted Japan, I decided to advance my study of genetics in America, and I couldn't have arrived at a more auspicious time in history. Within a year, they had put a man on the moon.
Government investment in sciences. History sure is wild.
If freedom of movement is one of the fundamental rights of man, then a prison train, such as this was, provided an ingenious loophole for my scheming captors. They slapped a fresh coat of paint on its rotting sides, and even went so far as to give it a rugged and exciting-sounding name, the Siberian Express.
This one's a bit of a swerve, really. At some point early on in his life, well, early-ish, Treglazov was kidnapped by someone and held captive on a train.
This is a replica of the train the headmaster was held prisoner on.
Well, quite.
They forged me a pair of cold, gray leg irons to match the color decidedly rare trait I believe I inherited from my Ainu mother.
Checking in.
My rations of stale bread and moldy cheese seemed especially cruel as our prison train crossed the Kama River into the foothills of the Ural Mountains. There, we passed one bucolic farm after another, every field dotted with plump, Russian black-pied cattle. Never in my life have I felt so bereft. I would have committed the most heinous of crimes to have tasted the rich, salty goodness of their flesh.
The parts of the manifesto's first chapter that make any goddamn sense at all and that Zager hasn't clumsily papered over seem to give the impression that his period in captivity inspired him to create the République.
If the food was bad, the water was worse. Discolored to the point that someone must have dyed it on purpose, and the taste could only be described as septic. Were it not for my robust constitution, I would have succumbed years ago to dementia from all the lead and other heavy metals in that toxic swill.
This, honestly, could explain a thing or two. Anyway, that's all from the train, and in fact from the museum, so let's get the hell out of here and try not to run into CVX again. Let's also try not to forget that that box is here. Anyway, as I said, the Treglasov Museum doesn't have a literal gift shop for us to exit through, but it does have a little annex with some things we can pick up, so maybe it serves the same purpose.
What was meant as a warning to Prizrak to be on the lookout for hiding precals is actually a good suggestion for the girl. Ducking behind the plant is a great way to escape detection.
Honestly, pot plants are the gift that keeps on giving. We can hide behind them and in them. This clipboard seems like it should be scannable, but it isn't. I don't know if that's an oversight or what, but whatever. Anyway, we've had the obligatory tutorial poster,
We can recharge here.
and now here's the obligatory locker containing a thing we don't have room for.
My pockets are full.
As befitting a double-sized confinement room, we have a double-sized helping of stuff to pick up.
Remind the girl to walk slowly. Hurried footsteps will attract the attention of the Prizrak.
This is really good advice. The sound of running can carry to other floors and cause a whole lot of confusion. I can think of at least one suspiciously acting Prizrak we've run into. The final collectible goodie in here, something Grand Tradition, can only be seen from the camera inside the second confinement cell.
A Zager cassette.
It seems highly implausible that these things would be left lying around in a place like this, and that they wouldn't be collected.
Welcome to my domain.
Let's drop off another rich bounty of data.
What are you buying? Lure Prizrak away from the trolls.
Distract is the first ability that will allow us to directly intervene with the guards' patrol routes. It's very conceptually uncomplicated.
So soon.
There are a couple of objects scattered around the environment that we can hack to make noise. They'll stay hacked for something like 20 seconds, during which any affected guards will walk over and just sit there staring at it. Excuse me while I try and get rid of the notifications on these tapes. Okay, that's done. Anyway, distract is great and can be used to accomplish some bullshit. Unfortunately, it costs £2. Oh, for Christ's sake!
I think he sees me. Help!
Fucking CVX. Well, this is incredibly annoying. But it does mean we can go and pick up that can of pepper spray that was in the prison room. Anyway, where was I? Right, yes, distract. It's great, but it costs 2 units of power to use on any given object, so...
0.
There's that disincentive in play. And there are a lot of recharge stations around, and we are carrying, I think, like 10 batteries at this point. But batteries in this game are kind of subject to the old Final Fantasy elixir logic. I mean, what if we need them later?
To get into the headmaster's office upstairs, we'll need his PIN code. I don't have it in my files, but we can recover it. We'll need to answer some security questions first.
If this man's so smart, why are all of his security questions literally on a school curriculum? This one at least requires a tiny amount of brain logic. Specifically, we know he arrived the year before the moon landings. And this one I think is a little bit unfair. The word he used in the narration was dementia, of which I think Alzheimer's is a subset. Or so I read on Wikipedia. Anyway, social engineering complete. Now we have a password reset.
It's a good place.
Let's get the hell out of this ridiculous place.
I hope they can't see me here.
I'm not sure if 1881 is intended to be a reference to anything in particular. There sure are a lot of notable births listed on Wikipedia for that year. For example, William Boeing, Pablo Picasso, and Pope John the 23rd. Hell if I know which of the hundreds of names on that page, if any, are being referenced here.
I've been this way before. We're getting closer to the headmaster's office.
One last irritation on our path. But not a particularly severe one. And of course there's something hidden in a little nook down there.
I'll take this.
There's something about carrying around 6 tasers that makes you just not take the threat of patrolling guards very seriously. We're gonna run past this thing for now, but we'll scan it later, don't worry.
This may come in handy.
See? Perfect crime.
I'll check his pockets. Nice.
Perfect 2-crime combo. See, this guy's funny because he calls himself Pirate Pete and is guilty of copyright infringement. That's funny, right? Yeah, whatever.
Why, librarian, you look like you've seen a ghost.
I see many ghosts on these walls. Why would you take pictures with monsters, and worse, display them proudly?
I have sat for pictures with many important people, even people I find disagreeable.
I suspect you mean me. How could you stand beside this man here?
Not a fan of the Generalissimo, are we?
I crossed an ocean to escape Franco's brutality, only to find his brand of fascism had been imported to Argentina.
Well, I can't speak to that, but I will say I found our meeting quite pleasant. He was an excellent conversationalist, and his taste in wine, impeccable.
Sometimes current events leave République's political commentaries feeling dated, but not this time. The headmaster's ridiculous platitudes about pleasant conversations with brutal dictators he finds disagreeable fit right in alongside 2017's ridiculous headlines about dapper white nationalists. Anyway, books.
Kafka's Metamorphosis. Best to keep using the German title, Die Verwandlung. We cannot risk cross-contaminating the name of our grand experiment with this simplistic trash. This book portrays the act of transforming one's essence as a vile and isolating experience. Such misinterpretation would burden our children with doubt toward our own ends. Squash this vile bug, librarian.
Okay, so Francisco Franco, disagreeable but excellent conversationalist. Franz Kafka, simplistic trash. Okay, got it.
Mir Mooney P takes me back in a big way. Back before the internet and FAQs, when we used to get stuck, we invested time into the game systems enough to make the incomprehensible become familiar. Eventually, it all made sense. The payoff was worth it. Mir Mooney P wraps that nostalgic sentiment in a gorgeous package, if you can embrace the challenge.
Mirror Moon EP is described by its positive Steam reviews as obtuse and almost inaccessible. I've resolved and then forgotten to play it, I think something like 12 times so far. This will be the 13th. Our exploration has brought us finally to the 3rd floor of the library building. Or half of it at least. The other half seems, characteristic? I'm gonna go with characteristic.
Nothing.
Anyway, it's a straight shot from here to our destination, with no distractions. Okay, one distraction. There's a confinement room across the way. It wouldn't do at all to miss another exciting email now, would it? There are approximately 0 surprises in here. It's never explicitly stated what exactly the collars do. I mean, it's a pretty good bet that they're used for tracking, but if that were the case, they'd know for sure whether or not Weep had disabled his collar. Let's just add that to the growing list of things in this setting that we have to wonder about. Continuing the something, there's a poster that we can only see from the camera inside the confinement cell.
If the battery on the girl's phone runs low, she need only find her way to a confinement room. Ideally, she'll visit them on her own free will, and not with a Prizrak escort.
If you were wondering what happens if Hope gets caught and doesn't have a can of pepper spray or a taser on her, well, what'll happen is that she'll put her hands up and the guard will march her slowly, screen by screen, into the nearest confinement room.
That's more than I can carry.
He'll then confiscate everything she's carrying and go and wander back to his post, leaving her in the cell. With her phone. There's like a single switch that you have to hack that controls the cell door, and then just like that, you're free. Like I said, this game is really the opposite of punishing. If you can be bothered to track down the guard, you won't even lose your stuff. Anyway, remember when I said 1 distraction? I'm sorry, I lied, there's actually 2 distractions. We've got another puzzle to solve. Yet we're literally doing 2 puzzles in 1 episode. This here guy also complicates matters somewhat. As you've probably guessed, the puzzle here is going to involve us wandering around and interacting with things, which our patrolling buddy here is probably not going to appreciate very much.
Equipping taser.
Now, we could play along with all this bullshit, but frankly, I'm more in favour of just cutting this particular knot.
He almost got me.
Hope, in what possible world did he almost have you? Well, whatever. Let's see what we've got in here. It looks like, well, obviously it is, a lot of statues. Judging by the inelegantly deployed mosaic censoring, I think we can be pretty sure that the statue at the head of the room is of Treglazov. So... we're obviously still missing something.
We owe a debt of gratitude to those giants whose shoulders we've stood upon. The earlier they lived, the larger their stature, and so the greater our debt.
And once again, everything just falls into place. If you're still wondering, don't panic. It's going to become even more obvious.
While the 20s roared in America, they screamed like a Siberian windstorm in Vladimir's hometown of Simbirsk. Controversial man of the people, he was surely. And the fact that he spent time in political exile makes him that much more admirable, in my estimation.
Sure, why not?
His detractors would call him an opportunist, and they would be right. But Yataro Iwasaki was given nothing less than the modest opportunity to bring an entire nation into the modern age, and he succeeded. The nerve of him.
For those following along at home, Yataro Iwasaki is the founder of Mitsubishi.
Plato's keen eyes peered further into the future than any of his Grecian contemporaries. He was, and will remain, the most vocal supporter of the classic Republic, and its earliest.
Plato's best-known work, The Republic, describes a hypothetical state ruled absolutely by a philosopher king.
A personal favorite. For those who would criticize him for his monopolistic tendencies in the early 20th century, I say, shout it from the rooftops, or, barring that, hop online and voice your disdain in a chat forum. He would appreciate the irony.
The president of AT&T during their quest to buy up literally every phone operator.
The father of Europe was besieged from all sides by pagan tyranny. And then in the year 800, he did a most remarkable thing. He held the hands of secularism and religion and married them together in what would later be called the Renaissance.
Technically correct, and historians may nitpick, but I think it's a little bit disingenuous to refer to that as the Renaissance.
Her death in 1952 was a tragedy, not just for the Argentine shirtless who idolized her, but for the anti-Peronists who celebrated her demise. Christ had a similarly divided populace to contend with, and like Eva, succumbed to sacrifice at the age of 33.
Sacrifice is not exactly the word I'd use to describe somebody dying of cancer, but hey, it's not my ridiculous history.
It is difficult to write a story as it unfolds, but to wait until it's finished is to risk butchering the telling of it. I would rather strain the wrists of those taking my dictation than cause even a modicum of butchery.
And I would rather not dignify any part of that with any commentary. 7 statues of politically historically relevant men and women, with their dates of birth displayed. And if you look, you will see that the statue of Plato is illuminated.
These statues, their arrangement is curious.
If you take long enough inputting a solution, Hope will start commentating.
The statue lit up. I think we did something right.
For the most part, it's not really necessary. I have no idea how far her hints go, and I don't plan on finding out. Anyway, we need to interact with these statues in the order in which their subjects were born. Like the other puzzles, it's not entirely out of the question that you can brute force this one. But why would you, really? Also, like the other puzzles, the point of it, really, is just to allow the headmaster some time to exposit.
Let's try the next one.
I suppose the elephant in the room this time around isn't really any particular moral judgment of these characters, but the fact that Treglazov considers himself their equal in the first place. But unlike the naked hypocrisy that emerges from his book reviews, or the literally two-faced viewpoints he offers on the various professionals, on this one we kind of have to hand it to him. This whole place, whatever the hell it actually is. It all came from him. He did this. He masterminded it all. Whatever exactly Metamorphosis is,
It worked.
it is, as he said, a state of his own creation. Of course, whether or not he manages to become the intellectual equal of Plato, or the industrial equal of Vale or Iwasaki,
You solved it. You're a natural at puzzles.
or the political equal of Perron, Lenin or Charlemagne, remains very much to be seen.
Look, it's another pyramid like the one near the headmaster's dining room.
So let's not get ahead of ourselves in our praise. There literally is no escaping these notifications. Oh well, video games.
I flock to Metroidvania games like a bee to honey. I just didn't expect to play one soaked in Mexican folklore. In Guacamelee, you play as a luchador who must fight through death to rescue El Presidente's daughter. While the premise is silly, it's clear that the developers at Drinkbox took their jobs seriously. Deep combat, epic boss battles, couch co-op. Guacamelee is the whole enchilada. Just don't forget to get the Super Turbo Championship Edition.
I loved Guacamelee from the moment I first launched it, but I didn't fall in love with it until I saw its take on the Morph Ball. He's not kidding about the Super Turbo Championship Edition either, they added a lot of stuff to that game. Anyway, software. And as if to reward our initiative in tasing the guard outside, right next to this upgrade server is yet another taser to add to our growing stockpile, bringing us back up to 6.
One of the Prizrek's tasers.
Beautiful. Now, since we're here, let's go poke around the headmaster's office.